Happy Friday to everyone who's here with us in real time, and to those who are watching the recording, happy whatever day it is that you're watching the recording. It's good to see a lot of familiar names and faces, and also good to see some new folks too. We are, several of us are from the Gardner Institute. We are going to introduce ourselves as we present our sections of this session. As Allison mentioned, we do invite your comments and questions throughout the presentation, so feel free to put them in the chat, or if you would like to ask them live, you can unmute or however else you'd like to ask them. We'd be very happy to answer any questions that you might have. My name is Stephanie, or Steph as I go by, Foote from the Gardner Institute. I'm going to get us started, but as I said, I'm going to let my colleagues introduce themselves in just a few minutes as they get to their different parts of the presentation. So here are our goals for our session today. We only have 50 minutes together, so these might be sort of lofty goals for us, but we're really hopeful that you all might be inspired as we've been inspired by this work, thinking about transfer pathways and the ways in which we can help transfer students to flourish, to be successful within the context of our curricula, that could be inspiring. And to that end, Brandon and I, my colleague at the Gardner Institute, who will introduce himself shortly, have invited some of our colleagues in this work from some of the institutions that we've worked with over the last year. So I don't want to share their stories or their introductions because they're going to do that in just a few minutes, but we hope that you will be as inspired by them and their work as we have been over this last year or so together. So at the end of this, we hope, again, that you'll be inspired. Hopefully you'll have some ideas for how you might take this into your own professional practice. And we would love to hear from you if you do decide to do that. This is a bit of an outline. We will be happy to share a copy of the slides with you all if you're interested. So we're going to have just a very brief introduction and overview of the curricular analytics community that we've offered over this last year. And we'll talk about the examples, the institutional examples. I mentioned we have some guests to do that, so they'll be sharing their stories. And then we'll end with some, what we think are some opportunities for adaptation. So a place for you to reflect and to think through how you might use these ideas in your own professional practice. Just quickly about the Gardner Institute, if you all are interested, some of you may be familiar with the work that we do. The Gardner Institute is located physically in Western North Carolina, although we're distributed all over the state and the country. And some folks are even international as well. We have some fellows, well, we have a fellow in Canada, but we've got others that have been international. We've been around for 24 years. We're a nonprofit organization, and we're focused on supporting institutions in the work that they do toward achieving equity and social justice. And if you're interested in more about us, we would be very happy to provide details and information. So our focus today is on the curricular analytics community work that we've been doing, and specifically on the transfer-focused curricular analytics community. We like to refer to the curricular analytics community as the CAC. So if you hear us say the CAC, that's what we mean, our curricular analytics community. But very briefly, what the CAC is, it's a community that's designed to involve faculty and staff in a process that uses improvement science, and that may not be familiar to you. So we're going to talk more about what improvement science is in just a few minutes, and curricular analytics tools to identify opportunities to create equitable curricular pathways for students. And in particular, in this case, with the transfer focus, we're looking at creating equitable pathways within and between these transfer institutions. So we're looking at how we can help students who are starting off perhaps at two-year institutions to be successful when they transfer, because we're eliminating some of those barriers that they may experience in the curricular pathways. So creating more equitable pathways and curricular design. We take a networked improvement community approach, and I think that's really unique because it assumes that none of us are all-knowing in this area, that we're conducting research ourselves, within our institutional context, and we're learning from and with each other. So there's a lot of synergy that exists within the networked improvement community. We all have a well-defined aim, and the aim is to improve these curricular pathways for our transfer students. So creating that curricular design that will improve transfer student success in terms of persistence and graduation rates. And then ultimately, what our participants leave with is a plan for action. So they're implementing what we refer to as a plan, do, study, act, or PDSA. So it's a plan that's actionable. Not that plans aren't usually actionable, but I think it's even more actionable because you've built into it measures and metrics that really help you to be accountable for the things that you said you're going to do. And so again, it's a really unique approach using these curricular complexity tools and using the improvement science methodology. We were really motivated. We've been doing the CAC for about a year and a half, and we were just offering it to different groups of individuals, but not really with a transfer focus. We were motivated, though, to offer this with a transfer focus, in particular, because we know as practitioners, as scholars, as individuals who work a lot with transfer students, we've worked a lot in our own institutions previously with transfer students. We know that there is a significant opportunity here, that there are a lot of costs associated with transfer, as you can see on the screen, and probably none of this will be new news to any of you. But we know that when transfer students are delayed in terms of their academic progress, when they have credit leakage, or when credits don't transfer, they don't transfer as they've intended to, that there's a real significant cost financially, but also personally, emotionally, socially. And so with this in mind, we were really motivated to focus on what we could do to improve the transfer system as it exists. And then this slide speaks to some of the lost opportunity. It's more of the human factor. So we know that, again, there are financial costs, but also, when students lose these transfer credits, they're less likely to ultimately transfer. They might swirl around for a while or even not persist at all. They may not transfer anywhere. So we know that there are some significant costs associated with this. So again, these were the motivators and also the human stories associated with transfer and the impact that individuals have had. So now I want to pass it over to my colleague, Brandon Smith, who's going to talk about the transfer GPS, another acronym, but that's our transfer version of the curricular analytics community that we've offered. So he's going to give you an overview of that, talk a little bit about the curricular complexity tools, a little improvement science, and then we'll move into our case studies. Brandon, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Steph. It's great to be with everyone today and to share this really exciting program. I'm Brandon Smith. I'm an associate vice president at the Gardner Institute, and just have the great privilege of working with folks on a number of different projects, most of which are, my role is related to the application of improvement science to improve equity and social justice in higher ed. So Transfer GPS, this is a project funded by College Futures out in California that involved 3 institutions to start. This is really a pilot of using some of these tools in a very novel way. But it involved Cal State San Bernardino. Our colleague Allison is here with us. San Bernardino Valley and Chaffey College. Angela is here with us from Chaffey. But there were 3 primary aspects. One is this curricular analytics that we're going to focus on today. And that's really trying to understand how the structure of our curriculum is impacting student progress and where we can create some efficiency. Because as we're able to reduce curricular complexity, we're actually able to see increases in retention, on-time graduation, decreases in things like excess course accumulation. So there's a lot of benefits to looking into curricular complexity. The second part of the project, which we won't dig in too much today, but our colleagues may talk a little bit about, is this local pathway automation, which means taking existing credits, putting them into a system and seeing the most efficient pathway to graduation, depending on major. Additionally, there's a transfer version of that where I can say I'm coming from institution A, trying to transfer to institution B. I'd like to go into this major. Here's my existing credit. And it can develop those very efficient pathways. There's a lot of complexity behind that. And if you want to know more, you can reach out to us. We'd be happy to talk to you about it. So Transfer GPS. The initial engagement is about 3 to 4 months long. And that's when we really dig into the improvement science with our institutions. We spend a lot of time looking at these curriculum maps, having discussions about the causal factors associated with delays for students, things that might get in the way of students, and trying to move towards the development through this networked improvement community of understanding what might drive change, both at the local level and between institutions. And then that is what informs that plan, do, study, act cycle, or that plan of action that Steph was talking about. What we really want to understand is where those key opportunities are for improvement, and understand how we would know, I say how we would know, how we think we would know that change was an improvement, either through lagging measures, which we typically see as our key performance indicators like retention, graduation, but what other things could we be looking to as leading measures related to this work that would help us know we were on the right track a little sooner. So this is an example. Now, this is a static picture of one of the curriculum maps that's built. We joke and call these our spaghetti and meatball maps. And I'll dig into what's in that in just a moment. But within the platform, our colleagues, it's actually a dynamic grid, and they can move through things, test changes to see how that would impact complexity. And it's really powerful. But when you could do this for all of your programs, it's hard to know where do we start. And some of the things that we recommend folks consider as they're trying to decide which programs to start their study on are looking for some of these factors like low retention rates, low rates of program completion, if there's a lot of excess credit accumulation, extended time to graduation, high transfer out rates within majors, or high rates of repeated courses. When we're seeing these things, there's efficiency trouble. We know we're not serving students as well as we might. And through a number of different studies, we found over the years, and Greg Heileman and Chawi Abdullah, who really were the developers of a lot of these tools and partners, fellows at the Gardner Institute, we found that we can basically see improvement through creating efficiency and curricular complexity, or reducing curricular complexity. And so when we say curricular complexity, what do we mean? Well, these are quantifiable factors associated with co-requisite and prerequisite relationships in courses. If you look at this graph, you'll see that blue dotted line that starts at that Math 125 course. And you can see that these courses on that line are all connected. That if you're not able to pass the first class in sequence, you have no access to the next class in sequence. That's the blocking factor, right? That when one course blocks other courses in sequence, we get a numerical value based on the number of courses that course blocks. The delay factor is a little different. The delay factor actually says this is the number of terms that a student might be delayed if they hit, they earn a D, failure, withdrawal, or incomplete. They're not able to proceed in their curricular pathway. And again, that can help us really understand the reality for students, and in some cases, why students might not be able to complete a major. There can be implications with financial aid, all kinds of things. The centrality is a really, really interesting factor as well. We think of that almost as how many roads in and how many roads out. Typically with a highly central course, once a student completes that course, a lot of additional coursework is open to them. And so this is a really key factor to consider, especially in transfer environments. And it's been really interesting to see the differences between a four-year path and a transfer path, and how all of these factors move so drastically for the transfer student. And a lot of that's really just been hidden for us, quite frankly, before applying these tools in this way. That final number is the complexity number. You see at the very top of the graph, it says curricular complexity 222. That's the overall sum of curricular complexity by term across this graph. And then you can see at the bottom of each term, there's also complexity. Again, there's a correlation between high complexity terms and retention. And just as you might expect in those first couple of terms, we tend to see very high complexity, which means there's limited access to coursework if a student's not successful. And again, there's all kinds of implications related to that. So this is curricular complexity in a nutshell, and it really is a nutshell in this short amount of time. I'm going to pass things off to my colleague, or actually, I'm sorry, I'm not going to pass things off. We're going to pause and reflect and see if folks have questions. We know we just hit you with a ton of information in a very short period of time. So if you've got any questions.
Brandon, I do have a quick question. This is Janet Marling. And right before complexity, you had a term centrality, I believe. So can you just go through that almost as quickly as you did before, but just one more time, because I want to catch that. I think that's really important.
Sure. The great question, Janet. So the centrality is really looking at how many courses essentially open up to the student afterwards. It tends to have a lot of prereqs that feed into that course, and those courses, they move around based on program. But I like to refer to them, just for simplicity's sake, is they tend to have a lot of roads in, so lots of prereq and co-req relationships. But then once the student passes that highly central course, they tend to have lots of pathways open to them. And again, that's why we see this drop in complexity typically in this junior and senior year, because students tend to have more access to coursework. Now, there are programs where that's not the case. In certain teacher licensure programs, we see a high complexity wall that occurs once they actually start that program. It can happen in other programs. We see it sometimes in transfer. Transfer, really, you've got to study each program individually, because for some, the complexity lies in those first couple of terms, and others it can move. It's really, at least so far, there's no sort of set answer.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. Just that distinction
Sure.
of it being that place where things come into, and then it's just a very central course to them being able to continue. So thank you for that.
Greg sometimes says, if you ask an instructor who teaches in that program of study, like, what's that most important course? It's either going to be one of those gateway courses on the front end, or it's going to be this highly central course that happens somewhere around the middle of the road, where after that course, students just fly through the program. And for us, you can literally see it. You can see why they're able to fly through, and it's because all of these courses open up to them that were essentially locked away beforehand. We'll have time, and again, y'all can stop us at any point. I'm going to go ahead and pass the baton to my colleague, Angela Burke-Herrick. Angela, the floor is yours.
Hey, everyone. I'm from Chaffey College. I'm a biology faculty member, but I've also been involved with guided pathways work. And so I just kind of want to set the stage of where we were before we entered this partnership and started on this Transfer GPS project with the Gardner Institute. About 4 years ago, a couple of us from the Chaffey's Guided Pathways team partnered up with Allison from Cal State San Bernardino, and you're going to hear from her in just a little bit. And we created these Finish in 4 maps that showed how our students could navigate through Chaffey coursework and then transfer to Cal State San Bernardino, which is where most of our students transfer, and complete their bachelor's degree in just 4 years. And we did this for just about 10 different subjects. And, it looks really clean, looks really nice. You do this, you apply to transfer, you do these other 2 years, and it's all good. And the focus at the time, right, when we built those, not quite yet, almost. The focus at the time was kind of about the sequence of courses and making sure they got all their requirements in, okay, but not so much from the student experience. And when we look at our data in the biology department, the reality is students are taking on average 5 years to complete just that left-hand portion, the Chaffey portion of the map, and they're at about 90 to 100 units from what should just take 2 years and be around 60 units. And so enter the Gardner Institute and our curricular analytics tool. Thanks, Brandon. Next slide. So this partnership and using this tool really allowed us to kind of check our work and again, take that to the next level and really think about, well, what are the students experiencing? This thing that looks great on paper, what is that experience really like from the student perspective? And so we could not only show a visual of how these courses were connected and the complexity associated, but we could really kind of interrogate each semester by semester what that felt like from students and identify pain points, possible obstacles, and challenges. And so just to kind of show one, Brandon, if you'll go to that calculus class in term 2, this is one that has high centrality. It's that second course down. Can you show there? Perfect. Just to give an example of what was just asked about, like high complexity, high centrality, that's the first calculus course, and it opens up a lot of other courses, not just at Chaffey, but it's a prerequisite for a lot of courses that they'll take in upper division after transfer. And so this identified an area of kind of a real high stakes course that it would benefit us to really think and be thoughtful at Chaffey about the support we're providing to students when they're taking that course. Similarly, if in term 6, up there at the top of the map, there's an OChem course, which is their first course after transfer. Not only does that have high centrality, but if you look at the overall complexity of the semester, like it's a huge leap right after they transfer. And so this is identified another opportunity that maybe support for students would be a good idea after they transfer. So next slide. So part of this work was kind of to identify what are some of those contributing factors in that complexity and what can we do about it. And so, and again, kind of develop that action plan so that we can smooth out this pathway. And so I'm not going to go through all the elements of this, but one of the extra benefits was not only did we look at curricular complexities, but just having the discussion using this tool with faculty, we identified some other obstacles that we should address as well. Some of them relating to technology and maybe providing some additional advising. We are working now. I wish I had great data and said, and we did this, and now look at where we are with, but it's a work in progress. So hopefully the next time we report out, we'll have some exciting results. Thank you. I think I'm turning it over to Allison next. Yes. All right. Allison from Cal State San Bernardino.
Okay. Thank you, Angela. I am Allison Wiles from Cal State San Bernardino, and I am the Associate Registrar for Transfer Credit and the Articulation Officer. And actually, I think, Brandon, can you go to I think I rearranged the slides. Sorry. Yes, there we go. So I'm going to talk more about the transfer piece. So on our end, some of the transfer challenges that we have, for those of you who aren't familiar with the California system, there's 23 different CSU campuses, and we really are regional universities. So we have a service area that we primarily take in students from that area. So in our service area, we have 13 feeder community colleges. So, when we're talking about curriculum alignment, we're really looking at kind of aligning what we do with 13 different feeder campuses. So the curricular analytics that Brandon was talking about, I think it would be great to see that as a regional effort because, we do have students flowing into us from those 13 colleges. And another factor, over 50% of our transfer students are swirlers. So they have transcripts from more than one school. And a lot of our students are attending more than one community college at the same time. So students kind of, go around and they find where the classes that they need fit in their schedule the best. But one thing that we also see is that even students who have a more direct 2+2 pathway, so they may be spending, their first 2 years just at Chaffey and then transfer to CSUSB. Those transfer students also have challenges due to, course sequencing, as Angela pointed out, some gaps between the introductory courses and the subsequent courses. So that OChem, that OChem situation in the biology major, we've talked about that a lot because the students take the general chem, their first 2 years at the community college. Then they have that gap and then they don't pick up the chemistry again until their junior year after they transfer. So there is some learning loss in that space. So one thing that I think, for us that's come out of these conversations and this work with the Gardner Institute, is looking into more local degrees or regional pathways as a solution. Right now in California, we have a kind of a statewide transfer degree program called the Associate Degree for Transfer. And it's a statewide template that I think for some majors, it works better than others. Some of the STEM majors, it doesn't provide the most direct pathway. So I think when we're looking at, increasing student success in some of these very sequenced majors like the STEM majors, I think, developing some regional pathways will be a better solution for students. So this is, I put together a few slides just to show some of the transfer challenges that our students experience. And this is, again, looking at biology. So because our students take coursework from so many different places, the way that the introductory sequences are structured can really impact students. So for example, at Chaffey, their introductory sequence, it's 3 courses, and it's divided into cell and molecular biology, and then separate courses for organismal and ecology. Riverside City College, another one of our feeders, they have 2 courses, and their courses are divided just like we do at San Bernardino. You can go to the next slide. But then there are other colleges who do it a little bit differently. So Allen Hancock College starts with cellular biology, and then they divide it into botany and zoology. So, if you had a student who, say, started at Allen Hancock, or started at, maybe started Allen Hancock and took the first 2, and then transferred to Chaffey and said, oh, well, I took the first 2 of the biology at, my first school, I'll just take the last one at Chaffey. They're going to be missing some content, and it's not going to transfer over as a block. So you go to the next slide. And then here's another version. So at De Anza College, they actually start out with organismal biology, and cell biology is the second course. Those courses have to be taken in order. So you could have a student who starts at De Anza, takes that first course, transfers to Chaffey, continues with the sequence, and they've completely missed cell biology. So, so this is some of what we see with the students that transfer into us. Okay, next slide. Oh, let me go back.
Should we go back to the first one we started on?
Correct,
Allison?
please.
Right, okay. Yep, you got it.
There we go. So the takeaways from the 4-year side, and engaging faculty in this kind of work can be challenging. It's been a bit challenging for us, even at transfer-centered institutions, which we are. The CSU campuses were kind of created as transfer institutions. So for our campus, our specific campus, for example, our target enrollment for fall 23, I believe, is to admit 2,800 freshmen and an equal number, 2,800 transfer students. So, that really is our function. But I think what we found in doing this work with the Gardner Institute, it's good to look for frustration points or common challenges as entry points. And it's also very important to include the faculty and the upper administration early in the process. So, in a recent meeting, when we did get some of the biology and chemistry faculty together, there was a lot of good conversations about some of the similar challenges that they face with teaching the OChem content and ways they could potentially collaborate to improve that for students. Something else that's come out is that our curriculum cycle really should be 2 years out. So for example, curriculum changes that we have approved for fall 22 should go into effect fall 24 rather than fall 23. And this gives our community college partners time to, look into those curriculum changes and, respond to what, our curriculum will be requiring at the upper division level. This is going to be a large culture change on our campus, but it's something that really does need to happen. Because if changes are approved in fall to roll out the next year, it's just, it doesn't create a good transfer environment for students. And then kind of going along with that, the course scheduling also needs to be 2 years out at a time. So we can plan to have those courses available when the transfer students will need to take them. and this is interesting, a couple of weeks ago, our provost had a meeting with the college schedulers, and he's now pushing the 2-year schedule plan. So he emailed me before the meeting and he said, hey, can you send me some talking points from that Gardner Institute project? So so I think this is definitely going to be a good change. And then kind of going along with that, we do need better communication about curriculum structure and changes. So, when our campus does make large changes to curriculum, and we've had a few of those in the last couple of years, we need to be better about reaching out to our partners kind of ahead of time and saying, look, this is what's coming. This is going to be the new structure for the graphic design major. And we also need to be better at supporting community college students prior to transfer. So one thing our office has done this past year, I hired 2 new transfer and graduation counselors in our office, and their focus is community college outreach. So if students or transfer center directors at the community college, before they've even applied to CSUSB, they can reach out to those 2 staff members in our office. And if they have questions about articulation, or say the student is a swirler and they say, look, I took this first biology course at this school, but I didn't finish the sequence. I'm thinking of taking this course here. Is that going to work for me? So we have 2 staff members in our office who are available for students. Okay. And I think that is the end of my slides.
Thank you so much, Allison and Angela. We do want now to give you all an opportunity to pause and reflect and to ask any questions that you might have of Allison or Angela or us about the work that they've been doing and we've been doing around the Transfer GPS project. I know in Zoom time, it seems like, 10 seconds is an hour, but we're going to give you ample time. Oh, there's a hand.
Yes, ask that, and then I'll jump in after Ben, if you don't mind.
Sure. Thanks, Janet.
Yes, well, first of all, thank you everybody for your presentation. This was really interesting. I'm just curious, so with the quantification of the different pain points that you've, for the pathways that you've analyzed, has any of that led to curricular reform? Because it looks like most of the examples that Angela and Allison gave were more sort of, providing additional support for students or, additional advising guidance, like recommendations for when to transfer. Is that sort of like, has that typically been sort of the main response rather than asking some of the programs to reconsider, are some of these gateway courses like truly necessary as gateway courses, or is there a possibility for revision there?
I could take this one.
Thank you.
So absolutely. In our department, you might have noticed when Allison showed that slide, actually, if we could go back to show that RCC Chafee slide, kind of the differences, you'll see that it's 13 units that our students have to take, only 10 units that they have to take if they're going to RCC. And so my department is in conversation, and we're going through program review this spring. And one of our plans is going to be to revisit our majors curriculum with and use this tool in that discussion and consider how we can lower the number of units while still preparing our students. And as you might imagine, I'm laying the groundwork for that conversation, and it is not going to be an easy one, right? Or so it's a difficult conversation to have. People get very attached to their curriculum. If we look at the number of students once they earn this award with our biology classes, our transfer rate in our department is actually of award earners is extremely high relative to the rest of the school. And so that can provide us a false sense of we're preparing our students well. And as why would we change anything? And as I say to my department is they better be prepared. They got 13 units, way more than, like, the state only requires 8 units of a biology series, just to put that in perspective. And so again, it's going to be an interesting conversation, but this tool kind of provides a good way to kind of dispassionately look at the pain points and start that difficult conversation with something other than, I'm Angela and I think we need to lower our units, right? So.
Yeah, I would agree. These are very difficult conversations. The faculty tend to believe that, the curriculum that they've created is the best curriculum. And, why would we change? But I'm having a conversation now with our art department because our graphic design major, the upper division courses have an insane amount of prerequisites. It's not friendly for transfer students at all. And it's been a real nightmare. But, being able to point to some of these things and, showing kind of all of the additional kind of work we're having to do to be able to, enroll these transfer students in their courses. I think it helps those conversations, they can see, oh, yeah, it's this is a problem.
Thank you. And best of luck to both of you with those difficult conversations. So.
Janet, I think you have a question.
Actually, yeah, it's somewhat similar because I want to applaud both Allison and Angela for what I would say seeing the light. Like, thank you. And especially Allison as being on the 4-year, I mean, it's so hard sometimes to convince folks in your shoes that these are the right things to do. So the lessons learned were just warming my heart significantly. Had you not gone through this process, would you have ever come to these same conclusions? And how long would that have taken?
I don't think so, because Angela and I, before this project, we, as she mentioned, we worked on another project that was intended to align transfer. And I think even the conversations that we had there, Angela, just about the ways that the curriculum wasn't really meshing exactly. Those were terrific conversations to have, when we were really diving into, this is what they're doing at Chafee, and this is what they need to do after transfer. Super, super helpful just to have all of those one-on-one conversations, major by major, and to really break it down. But then this project kind of took that to a next level. So yeah, very helpful.
Absolutely. I want to put an exclamation point on that. Like, we had conversations and identified some issues. Like we know that the biology, it's not like we didn't know that biology is high unit, and it's not like, right, but it really gave us that longitudinal, kind of overarching pathway where we saw maybe more of the pain points than we had imagined the first time. And so it's, and again, I want to emphasize that it's kind of that way in, and it, particularly for me in STEM, showing, they like the visualization, they like the data, right? And then it's just a way in to start to really, really take a look. And it has us looking at those complex, just to kind of show when we look at a high complexity semester, one of the things that we're also talking about, well, what does time in the classroom look like for students in that semester that they need to stay on, because you saw how sequenced everything is, right? So what does that, there's extra units. Some of the high units come from labs that they don't need for the transfer institution, right? Some of our classes have 6 units of lab a semester. And if they're doing 6 units of lab in their chem class and 6 units of lab in their biology class, and they're working and taking the lab, right? So it allows us to kind of take that snapshot. Anyway, so you get the idea. It's just a way to augment. It's not impossible to have the conversation without it, but it's just a nice way to end.
Thank you both. I appreciate it. And thank you for being so open-minded and willing to not only see the data, but also absorb and then act. So great job.
We have a final reflective exercise, just a quick exercise that we'll do in a moment, but we want to make sure we've answered any sort of top of the mind questions that you might have. There were some great questions that came in the chat about who comprises the committees, who's doing this work at the institutions. And as you can see from Angela and Allison's roles, we have a wide range of participants, including faculty and department chairs, but also administrators, staff members, academic advisors. And then several institutions have had student assistants involved too, not so much on the committees, but actually helping to enter the data and to do some of the behind the scenes work. And so I think there's also a great opportunity there. I'd love to see more students, involved in these committees moving forward, especially when we talk about transfer. I think that's incredibly important.
I'd just like to sort of elevate Allison's question in the chat as well, just about who makes decisions. And we really, using the processes in the CAC, we really try to invite as many community members in to look at these things and ask lots of questions. Curricular complexity is not inherently bad. What we're trying to understand is what is the intentionality behind that complexity? Are there legacy prereqs that don't need to be there? Where are the learning outcomes occurring? If things moved around and we reduced complexity, what might happen for the student? And so inviting faculty in to ask them, this is your program of study. Why do you think this complexity occurs? Did you know it was there? And then why is that occurring? How is that impacting students? And what do you think improvement looks like? And start to have those kinds of conversations that can break down a lot of walls related to our protection. I mean, I did this for a program I created myself years ago, and I saw it with a whole new light. So it's a powerful tool and a powerful group to be able to be in a safe place with other colleagues to talk about these things and say, oh yeah, I see that in my own program, or I hadn't thought of that before. That's part of the fun and the power of this. So just wanted to throw that out there as well.
And Brandon, I just wanted to add to that end, like some of the complexities we identified through this process, as Allison said, it kind of highlighted in a big way some problems with the state-defined curriculum of what an associate's degree in biology needs to have. And so if we can show these, right, it gives us a tool to break down that conversation at the state level as well, rather than just Angela from Chafee in the biology department saying, this associate degree for transfer really could use some work, right? So it gives a power to elevate that complexity when you look at it across many different community colleges, right? And their transfer institutions.
Yeah, I think if we had put the Chafee faculty and the biology faculty in a room and said, come up with a degree, they would have come up with something quite different.
So we've made reference to some of the conversations that are occurring now, and that's where the project is going. So we have an opportunity through a bridge grant to continue to bring together faculty for conversations about how they might, make some revisions. So the more of the difficult conversations. And we're very excited about that and very hopeful. And then we also have some additional institutions that we're planning to onboard. So we're excited too about expanding the network and hopefully expanding it even further in this pilot. So that's where we're going with all of this. And we look forward maybe to next year and sharing out more of what's been done and some of the outcomes associated with the work. Any other questions? You all have been a very engaged audience, and we appreciate that. We have a slide and a Padlet, and I know our time is just about up, but if anyone had any reflections or questions, key learnings, takeaways, anything they wanted to share, you are welcome to put them in the Padlet if you would like to. And I also have put our contact information. And again, I'm going to share out a link in just a moment with these slides, and we'll make sure they're posted as well in the conference site. But here's our contact information. So if you'd like to follow up with any of us about the things that we've shared today, we would be very happy to speak with you or to have a conversation over email too, whatever your preference is. All right. Well, thank you all so much. We appreciate you. Thank you.